you have an idea of where you want to go and what you want to create. And I was thinking about this more in terms of like music than anything else. Is like, what are you planning to do? Are you planning to put out music this year? Are you planning to create? Have you been writing? That's really important. We get a lot of times lost in like the marketing talk and, talking about building an audience and capturing that attention and then turning it into customers and building revenue in your business. But at the beginning of it all, if you're not creating, I think for a lot of artists, like you start to lose the fire a little bit to do anything else. Like it's almost a domino effect. So having a clear vision of where you want to go creatively, I think is really important as well.
You are now listening to the Creative Juice podcast brought to you by Entrepreneur.io.
Welcome to 2022 Indies and welcome back to the Creative Juice podcast. I'm so excited to be here after our little holiday break. I'm your co-host, Jack McCarthy. With me is my co-host, Mr. Ed Isola. Ed, what is up, dude? Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, my friend. For anybody that's watching on video, I just held up double peace signs as the 22. So that's my welcome to 2022.
We made it. We made it to 2022. I'm so excited. I think this is going to be a really fun episode. We were kicking around some ideas of cool ways to kind of start the new year here on Creative Juice. And we thought it would be cool to kind of bring to you some of the mindsets and frameworks and some of the insights that some of our most successful artists at the IndieX agency are kind of bringing with them into the new year and how they're kind of using that to set in place the puzzle pieces for success for 2022 for them. And hopefully you guys can take some of these ideas, some of these mindsets, these mental stances, whatever you want to call them, and take them with you and internalize them for yourselves and use them to win big this year. So I'm really, really pumped to get into this.
Yeah, man, this is going to be really exciting because this is all a mentality thing, in my opinion. Like, this can be applied to an artist of any size. It's really about how you approach what you're trying to achieve, outline what you're trying to achieve, and actually get there. So I enjoy talking about this kind of stuff because I do think that as much as we talk about ad campaigns and emails and like all that stuff, which technically is really, really important, the mindset and the approach is, equally as important. You got to make sure that you're looking at things the right way so you can work on them the right way.
Yeah, 100%. And I think, this is kind of a risk for us. Like we don't usually take a whole lot of time to talk about mindset and like putting yourself in a solid mental framework when it comes to your music career. So this is kind of different, but I thought it was a risk worth taking because we work with a lot of really, really cool artists, especially at the agency where we get to really see in depth, how they're thinking about the stuff that they're creating and how they're thinking about their marketing and how they're thinking about their goals. And, just conversations over the holidays and throughout December with a lot of our clients, myself, and maybe you can speak to this as well too, Ed. And I know a lot of the other account managers and the specialists at IndieX would say the same. Like a lot of our artists really like buckle down and say like, okay, these are the things that we're going to be focusing on in this year and getting input from us and then creating plans and really coming up with some cool stuff. And I think those kind of mentalities are the things that will take you forward in your music career. And a lot of people could learn from that. So I was really pumped to talk about it and kind of take a different approach to episode 202 here.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that kind of perfectly segues into the first bullet point we had down, which was like, as you start off or as you're going, no matter where you are, you have to be prepared to take responsibility for your own success or your own failure, honestly, mentally, and let that kind of guide you and drive you. I think that that's something that we see a lot at IndieX is that the people that come on and are the most successful are people who have an active hand in ideas or releases and kind of giving fuel to the fire, so to speak. It's like the way I think about it for myself and for anybody I talk to is like nobody wants you to succeed more than you want yourself to succeed, most likely, right? Like if you're doing this, you're probably working harder than anybody. And you might have a job and then you spend 40 hours a week on your music. And like people might say you're crazy, but if you want to do it, you're going to do it. And you have to be prepared to go there and kind of understand that like, hey, my success largely is dependent on my effort.
Yeah, for sure. I couldn't agree with you more. I think that's a huge part of the equation when it comes to success in any kind of space in the business. And it's especially true with creative careers, music careers. I think most often what we see at the agency is our clients that are ready to kind of just take their career by the shirt and, drag their future ideas into the present and then really take action on it and really, set the things that they want to do and say like, I'm going to make this happen. Whether you have a team or you don't, or whether you're working with a band or you're a solo artist, like I think taking responsibility for yourself and giving yourself permission. This is something I wanted to talk about, like giving yourself permission to be that person, to be the driver to take things forward. And I'm probably sounding, a little motivational, hopefully, and maybe a little over emotional about this, but I think that that's really critical. A lot of indies kind of get stuck in a paralysis state where they feel like they're not ready to take action on something, where they're not ready to start getting their music out there, where they're not ready to make an offer to their fans, whatever it might be. And because of that, that lingering doubt in the back of your mind also stops you from taking responsibility for your success or your failure at doing so. And I think a lot of people look for permission from the possible team that they might have, or their manager, or their record label, or, their drummer, or their singer, their bandmate, whatever it might be. And so, as cliche as it might sound, like if you're looking for permission or you're looking for a sign that like you've got the green light to go ahead and make this a good year where you can actually go ahead and attack your goals and be responsible for it, this is it. Like you're listening to it. As silly as that sounds, like I think that that's really important is to, in this new year, is to have a sense of full ownership over what you're doing, whether you're working with a team or whether you're by yourself.
Yeah, and I think the other thing too, like just to build off of that, is that I feel like we sit here and we talk about like, for your success, you also have to kind of define what you consider success, in my opinion, because everybody has a different opinion of what that word means, and making sure that you kind of understand, hey, I'm successful if I do this, right? It's not I'm successful if I now have 10,000 people on my email list. It's like, it could be I'm successful if I find it in myself to build my first fan finder campaign over the next couple months. Just set reasonable goals for yourself and then go after them. And what I've found works the best and which artists have the most success that we work with, it's artists that set those goals for themselves and start working towards them with like 100% effort. That attracts other people on the team to kind of start putting more work in and build from there. So just make sure as you're kind of taking responsibility, you're also setting yourself reasonable goals that you can say, yeah, I did it. Good. What's the next goal? Let's do that one. Let's keep building. Let's go there. So I think that's an important thing to kind of just distinguish.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And it kind of segues nicely into the next sort of like mindset framework that I think is really important as we're looking into a new year. And that's like being prepared with a creative vision. And this kind of falls under like a goals category, right? It's like you have an idea of where you want to go and what you want to create. And I was thinking about this more in terms of like music than anything else. It's like, what are you planning to do? Are you planning to put out music this year? Are you planning to create? Have you been writing? That's really important. We get a lot of times lost in like the marketing talk and, talking about building an audience and capturing that attention and then turning it into customers and building revenue in your business. But at the beginning of it all, if you're not creating, I think for a lot of artists, like you start to lose the fire a little bit to do anything else. Like it's almost a domino effect. So having a clear vision of where you want to go creatively, I think is really important as well. I know you and I were talking about this just last week, Ed, about your band and saying like, hey, like I need to get to writing some songs.
Yeah. I mean, it's something where like, I feel like what has been the biggest driver of our success the last year and then change was that we knew exactly what we wanted to do in terms of like rolling the album out, how we wanted to roll it out, what we wanted our color scheme to look like, all that kind of stuff. We just knew that, hey, this is what we're going for. This is the party line, so to speak, where it's like, this is what we're going after. And having that makes it way easier to just try to actually do it. It gets overwhelming if you're trying to figure out what you want to do and also how to do it at the same time. So I always think it's a great idea to take time to like set your creative vision and to get content that you can actually roll out, because it's easier to make a timeline, easier to make a strategy when you have your content at least ideated on, where it's like, oh, I know I need pieces A, B, and C, or I need these singles, or I need these pieces of artwork. It's like, okay, great. I have the music. Let me go create this stuff. And then with that, I can craft a rollout plan. So I think that's a really great point as well. It gives you something to work with.
That's a good way of saying it. Like you kind of let your creative goals, which is the fun stuff to dream up. I think back to like my earliest days thinking about being in bands and being a musician and writing songs. Like so much of it was taken up with like, oh, I got this song. Like what will the cover art look like for it? You know, I want to put this record out. What is the overall branding going to look like? Like what kind of photo shoot are we going to do? Like that is fun stuff to get into. And I think a lot of times when you kind of hunker down and are really working hard on the marketing, it's easy to lose sight of, you know, sort of that creative spark that can then ignite the rest of everything, ignite the rest of your goals. So yeah, I definitely think that that's something important and helpful to refresh upon if you haven't already, you know, throughout the holidays. I think that it's a cool thing to kind of step back and consider. What would you say, you know, we have plenty of conversations with folks at IndieX and we'll have a chat and be like, hey, well, like, what's the plan for the new year? Like, what are you putting out? Are you going to be releasing singles? Do you have a record that you're planning? Or are you planning a string of EPs? And sometimes I do come across like a conversation or two where it's like, you know, I'm not really sure what I want to do. I'm not really sure where I'm going creatively. I'm curious how you kind of approach sort of that creative stuckness that sometimes comes up, especially when you've been like in the throes of touring or recording, or you're just coming off an album cycle, or you're coming off a big launch or something like that.
Yeah, well, that's what I was going to say. Like, I think it's also an acceptable approach to work in segments almost. I mean, the entirety of the 502's career has been like, all right, here's a period of like, we're making music. And then I get super into marketing the music. I do that. And like you said, we're planning photo shoots, brand colors, all this stuff. And sure, there's songwriting going on in the background, but it's not as like active as you'd think it would be so for example, like right, all of 2020 was finishing recording the album, planning the album launch. 2021 was creating video content for that album, releasing the album, trying to get attention to it. And now we're heading into 2022. And it's like, okay, we've got some systems in place. Like there's ad spend going, top of funnels continuing to go. I almost feel like I'm now pulling back and like treating that ad spend as like the umbrella, so to speak, where it's like, hey, this is creating to generate attention. While that's on autopilot, I'm going to go try to come up with some more songs so that we can repeat the process in the back half of this year or next year. And if you're doing this by yourself or with a small team, like, it's okay to not always be sitting writing music, in my opinion. People might not agree with that, you know, where people might say, hey, you need to get there every day, an hour, 2 hours, flex your creative muscles. And it's like, if it works for you, sure. But like, if you're dreading writing music, you know, for the day, it's like, just back off. Who cares? You know, you don't want to be doing something you hate. That's kind of how I think about it, is like when I feel like I need content or feel like I'm inspired to write a song, I do. Otherwise, I don't stress about it.
That's a really interesting point, actually. I had a conversation with an artist a couple weeks ago who said that he had a really hard time trying to rigidly set himself up for songwriting. Like he was trying to set himself up into a flow where he was writing every day at like, you know, between the hours of 3 and 5. And it just wasn't his thing. And you know what? Like that is okay. I'm sure there's plenty of great songwriting wisdom about writing every single day and kind of forcing yourself to get something out there. And I've kind of been one to test the waters with that myself in the past. But some people operate differently, where it's just like, you know, creativity strikes differently, and you're not necessarily always going to be in an epoch of your workflow where you're writing and you're doing everything else. So I think that is a good distinction to make. Like your workflow might be different from the artist that you played with last night. Maybe you have someone in your band that is kind of the person that's just churning out songs while you're working on the marketing. I think like it's really hard to apply blanket advice to any of this.
And I think too, like you said this well, that like creating music is part of the creative process, right? At the same time, marketing your music is part of the creative process. So I have always thought that there's only so many creative things that you can do at once. And it's okay if it's not always writing music. Like you have to make sure you're keeping that in mind. But the bullet point here was like, make sure you have a creative vision, even if that's high level. For me, last year, the creative vision was get videos, figure out brand color and cohesion, and do an album launch. That was a lot of creativity to me. There was no new music, but it was creativity. This upcoming year, for me, it's like new music and then repeat that process of the launch. but it goes in cycles. So be kind of kind to yourself when you're thinking about it, but have something in mind, even a high level of like, this is what I'm hoping to achieve this year, and then work backwards from there.
Yeah, that's so well said, man. Like, blanket advice for creativity is a recipe for burnout. And you're right. In some ways, like, you can only do so much creatively at a time. And your marketing is a part of your creativity. You know, we preach that constantly on the show. And I do agree with you that, like, it could be a recipe for burnout if you're constantly trying to tap your creative vault out with all sorts of different stuff and context switching all the time. Like, being able to focus down on the one thing that you need to be doing in a given day or a given week or a given month is really important.
Yeah. Now we're just talking about songwriting, but my last point there is like, I like change of scenery. So, you know, I've been like slightly stuck in I don't have any good lyric ideas yet right now. So I've just started going for walks each day, and it's like, oh, look at that. Now lyrics are coming, right? Like, you just kind of got to be able to relax and remove yourself from just day to day, I think. Creative vision for the win.
Well, speaking of creative vision, like taking your creative vision and then applying more goals to it, I think is something that we've kind of touched on this before. We've definitely touched on this on other episodes. I know back in November before the new year, we talked about like how to set a roadmap and start planning for your year. But I think that is an attribute that our most successful clients at the agency have, is that they're looking at where their audiences have been growing, and they look at that and they say, okay, well, based on this, here's my roadmap. You know, I'm looking at my metrics. I'm seeing what happened in the past year, where I've grown, where I haven't, you know, how has my fan base grown? How have my listeners then turned into customers? How is my revenue changing? And where are the opportunities? I think that that's really important to be looking at in conjunction with, you know, everything that we've been talking about so far, you know, taking that responsibility, having your creative vision. This is kind of the next step to taking those higher level things and making them a little bit more granular and goal oriented based on where your business is growing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it kind of builds off the comment I just had, which was like, put your high level creative goal in your mind and then work backwards from there. So if the goal for me this year is new music and then an album launch, it's like, okay, well, now how do I actionably work towards that? And that's kind of what this is getting at. It's saying, well, it would make sense for me to, one, look at like who's interested in those things I just listed, get a plan of what kind of content they like in my head, and then write down, okay, I want new music and I want an album launch this year. Well, what that looks like to me is I need to go take time to get songs. I need to write the songs. I need to get behind the scenes content because I know I'm going to use that for the album launch. And then what kind of stuff do people like from our historic album launches that I can include in this one? And so you're just kind of starting to look at where you've been, look at what you're going towards and what you're trying to grow to, and just kind of refine out what you're working on throughout the year.
That's a great point. And just to tack on to that, like something else that you kind of alluded to here is like not only knowing where your audience has grown and where the opportunities are, but also knowing what your audience is into and what they've liked, because then you can lean into that more and kind of use that as like the data piece of, I need to be doing more of this and less of that. I think that that's really important to know. And if you don't know, you should ask your fans. Literally just survey them. Ask them the things that they liked about your last single or the last release that you did. Ask them what they like about the emails that you're sending. Ask them what they like about your store. And if you were to restock items in the new year, what might they be into? Like, ask your fans what they like about you. The amount of information that you'll get from that, believe it or not, is crazy. Like, we see that all the time with our artists at the agency. It's crazy what a simple survey can do to like open up your mind and kind of shine light on questions that you've had about what's working and what's not.
Dude, it's crazy you say that, because for the longest time, I feel like I was anti-survey for some reason. Like, I feel like I have a good relationship with our fans and I'm able to like kind of talk to them in live videos and comments and from there, but I've just never been a survey person. And I started thinking yesterday, like, hey, it'd be cool if we released our album in a more like stripped back version, you know, like instead of full instrumentation, like guitar, banjo, voices, kick drum, tambourine, you know, like really like traditional folk stuff. It's like, I just feel like people might like that, but I've been kind of doubting whether I would or wouldn't. And so yesterday on an Instagram story, I posted like, 11 o'clock at night. It's like, hey, let me see. I pulled it up. I said, does anybody actually want us to release acoustic versions of songs from Could It Get Better Than This? And 885 people have said yes and 10 people said no. And it's like, it's like the 10 people that said no are dead to me. No, I'm just kidding. But it's like, I did not expect such an overwhelming positive response. And everybody's like, yes, please do this song, do that song, do this. And it's like, wow, okay. So something that was a maybe in my mind is like a must have for our fan base. And it's like just asking for, like, as uncomfortable as it might seem, is a really good suggestion that you just made.
Man, we're just like full of segues here, and that's weird, and I don't know why it's happening, but like this kind of goes into what we were going to touch on about content in general, and like having an eye for content and knowing, we're talking about where your fans hang out and what kind of content goes there. Like I think on the last episode when we talked about our 2022 predictions, which was like how native content is going to be even more hypercritical in 2022 and beyond. And I think artists that are in tune with that and they know what content is working for different platforms and different placements and how they like to create that style, like what style they have a flair for in it, and if they like doing it, I think is really important. And you kind of underline my idea here in saying that like, I didn't really like surveying my fans, but you found a way to do it that was palatable to you, like the IG story type survey that worked for you, as opposed to like sending out an email or something like that, or sending a text message, which like, that's also very successful, but it just didn't feel right to you given the type of content that you like to create and how you've been engaging with your fans recently. So I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's a great point. It's like you said, know where your audience is and know where they're growing and know where people are interacting. Like also, that will change over time. It will adapt. Early on, we were a strictly Facebook audience. And then this last 6 months, it's moved really heavy to Instagram. And so now it's like we have this great base, and it's like it will develop over time, but where you are comfortable talking to people and asking them questions, like the people are following your pages, right? They're not gonna be like, you suck, don't do this. To me, it's a question of how excited are they about the idea. So to me, posting that story, getting 800 responses on it, it's like, yes, okay, great, perfect. These people are actually excited about it, as opposed to if I post it and it gets like 200. And for our audience, it's like, okay, maybe not as enthusiastic, but you can kind of gauge that based off of the intensity of the answers.
I think a question that a lot of artists struggle with, especially when they're just starting out, is like, what platform should I be on? And I feel like this is like an age-old question, right? Like, what social media should I pay attention to? Where should I be? Like, should I be chasing trends? And my answer has always kind of been like, go where your fans are. And that's a fine answer, I think, but it doesn't necessarily help people who are just starting out and who don't have fans and don't know where their fans might be, because I could point you to Facebook and say, you probably have fans there. I could point you to Instagram and say you probably could find fans there. I could point you to TikTok and say you could probably find fans there. And the same is true with YouTube and so many other places. So I think my answer to this is kind of evolving. And that's why I wanted to talk about this, is like having an eye for content right now to me means like you're paying attention to what's going on platforms that you like. If you're finding that you're, diving into TikTok and you're enjoying it, then you're probably starting to get a sense of what kind of content is working on there and what kind of content you might like to create on there. And that's where I think successful artists right now are leaning into the things that they're like, oh yeah, like I know what works for me. If you've already got like an established base or an established presence or brand or business, you know what works for you. And you're starting to tiptoe into the things that are like, and I also like this, like I've built up a fan base on Facebook. I've built up a fan base on YouTube, whatever it might be. But I've been messing around with TikTok and it's pretty fun. Like I've been putting some content out on there and I've been consuming a lot of content on there. You're seeing what other people are doing and you're finding the things that you like and thinking about how you can emulate it. I think that that's the kind of like framework to have in your mind when you're thinking about like a new platform that comes out. So you're not getting shiny object syndrome for no reason. You're just finding the stuff that you actually genuinely like to do.
Yeah, I think that's a great way. And like, be open. If you would have told me at the start of 2021, I would be like super active on TikTok and Instagram, I probably would have laughed, but just people started messaging us there. I started spending more time on both of them. And now I love them. I like talking to people in DMs and comments and all that stuff. It's like, just if you're advertising, explore your advertising options. and kind of start to be active on the places you enjoy and where people are actually engaging with you. So this might be the most honest look at what you and I talk like in our conversations just day to day on the phone. It's just like, here's where we're at. Here's what we think. And I think it's a really great way to kind of let people into the mindset that we see work really well.
Yeah, for sure. I think this was a fun kind of bullet point in and of itself. Like, we could probably talk for hours about content and like where you hang out on social media, because I think the way that I feel about it personally is like, it's less about like this platform is dead or like this one is popping off and you need to be there and you need to beat the rush, and it's a gold rush to TikTok or it's a gold rush to Reels or, whatever it is that pops up next. Like, it becomes less about that and becomes more about like, there's probably an audience for you on any of them, and none of them are probably dead or dying. It's just a matter of like, do you like being there, and do you like making content the way that people like to consume it there? And does that resonate with you? Have you found like what makes sense to you? And if not, then like, you don't need to spend your time there if you've got your thing, and you'll find it eventually. Like, you just need to explore. I think that's something that is kind of a helpful way to think about different platforms. It's just like, why don't you spend some time just exploring it and having fun with it? I know, like, I'm kind of similar. Like, I didn't even have TikTok on my phone until about like 3 or 4 weeks ago. And I've been running TikTok ads for quite a while now. I mean, quite a while in the span of TikTok ads. It's not like it's been a massive amount of time on a long time horizon, but just to say, like, I haven't had the actual TikTok app until fairly recently. And I've been having some fun just like exploring through it and flipping through it and being like, oh, I could see myself making this kind of stuff based on things that I like. So yeah, that's been pretty interesting for me. I'm curious what your experience has been like as you've kind of gotten into it more and more on a personal level.
Yeah, I mean, I thought TikTok was dumb. That was my personal view of it. And then I forgot why I downloaded the app. And I thought it was just a bunch of dancing, And I was like, I don't get this app. And I downloaded it for some reason and slowly started just spending more time on it. And I pretty much now only open up TikTok and Instagram on my phone, and Spotify for Artists. Those are the 3 apps that I open up. And it's like, I grew to like it. And like you said, you have to give yourself the freedom to become a fan of something before you can make great content for it, is kind of how I feel. Like, I have spent so much time watching artists on TikTok because that's what shows up on my For You page, that I have a really good idea now of like, oh, this is what musicians post. Like, viral videos that musicians post, this is what it looks like. And just by being a fan of TikTok now and of people on the app, it gives me ideas around like, oh, okay, well, we could do this or we could do that. And like, let's post that kind of content. And like you said, becoming a fan of something, engaging with it on like a no agenda kind of level, I think that's what allows you to kind of develop that eye for what good content looks like.
Oh man, that is so good. Becoming a fan of something allows you to develop the eye to be able to create on whatever that something is. That's so good. I mean, that's true of anything. Like, you think about it, like, that's true of advertising. Like, that's true of Facebook ads. Like, you don't get good at writing copy until you start doing it, or better yet, reading it. You start paying attention to good copy, and then you develop the processes in your head of, oh, okay, I can see in the headline what they're trying to do here. They're trying to get my attention. Now they're trying to really pull at me a little bit more and get me to be more interested. And, oh, here's the desire point. And now they're trying to get me to take action. You start to realize that, and then you become a fan of it. So I think that this applies to really anything. Like, I see it in myself even. Like, I'll log into Facebook and I'll jump into a group where I'm, active. And all of a sudden, like, I'm like, oh, there's actually some pretty cool stuff going on in here. Like, how could I emulate this for myself? How could I emulate this for my fans? So I think it exists everywhere. It's just a matter of like allowing yourself to become a fan of something. I've certainly seen it in YouTube as well, and in sort of the ways that some videos are structured. So yeah, I think that's such a good point.
Yeah, man. I mean, I think that's something that I've even heard people say about artists. And please do not quote me on this. I can't remember off the top of my head. I want to say somebody was like, Drake is so great because when something's popular, he is the master at listening to it and creating something that's similar but adjacent to it and releasing it. Not that all his songs are that way, but they're like, he's such a great person of becoming a fan and creating his own version of that where people can still relate to it in a timely manner.
I'm going to have to look up this quote. That's really interesting.
You'll never find it. It was on like a TikTok video. So
that's hilarious.
But they had examples, and like, it was a fan of Drake, so it wasn't like from a bad place, but it's just like, yeah. And I think somebody else said a very similar thing about Billy Joel, you know, that he was always really good at kind of coming up with things that sounded similar to what people liked. And so my comment really is just like, it's not a bad thing to become a fan of something and then learn from it. People might look down on that like, oh, it's not original. It's like, no, like you could put your own original spin on something once you're a fan of it. So I've always liked that and kind of looked to that, especially as a place of unblocking when there's a creative block.
I mean, I've definitely applied that in the creation of music and the production of music, especially early on. Like, so much of what I wrote and what I recorded was like directly because I was a fan of the other artists and the bands that I was listening to. It was like, I just want to write songs like them. And then it wasn't them, it was me. I think the same thing applies to marketing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it applies to everything. And that's where it's the point of like, hey, you will develop content and become a fan of it and kind of go from there. That gives you all the insight you need to know as you kind of head into the year. And like, it's a great approach for people that are maybe like, I don't know where my fan base is. I don't know how I find people. It's like, okay, well, just start here and see how it goes. And then you can move to a different platform if you need to.
Yeah, for sure. Man, that's so good. The last kind of mental framework that I wanted to touch on was like, and it almost erases, or not erases, but it calls to task everything that we've talked about so far. And that's just the ability and the willingness to pivot when things aren't going how you expected them to. And I think that that's such an important thing to keep in mind when you're setting goals. Here, take this for example. Like, one of the big things that we're doing at IndieX with a lot of our clients right now is, preparing sales promo calendars and helping brainstorm offers and stuff like that. But we might create offers and then down the line realize like, we got to reset our goals. Like, these offers aren't right. We got to change the calendar. And that could happen 2 months down the line. It could happen 6 months down the line. It could happen, towards Q4 of this coming year. And those kind of pivots, you have to be willing to make them and not necessarily be married to the ideas and the processes that you came up with in the beginning. Learn from your data.
Yeah, I would say probably if you ask the guys in the 502s what my biggest weakness is, it's that I am always pivoting. But until pivoting in the sense until something feels right, I'm very much flexible with like, all right, well, look, we've gone stagnant on our Spotify growth. Like, let's try TikTok ads, right? That was your suggestion, I think. And that's something I had thought of, but I was like, why not? Let's try it. Let's see if it works. And same thing with like release schedules and that kind of stuff. It's like, all right, let's do this. Let's do that. And if at any point it's like feels forced or not, I'm not saying I just abandon anything at the first drop of a hat of like, oh, this could be difficult. But it's like, if it doesn't feel right, it's okay to pivot. And whether that's a release schedule, a marketing strategy, a song, I think that giving yourself that freedom to pivot is so important. And I think that's where having a roadmap for the year in your head allows you to successfully pivot. Because if you've got on your roadmap 3 releases and one's falling through, okay, well now you can slide the other one up, right? Maybe you need to slide one up and move the first one back. So having an idea of the big picture allows you to successfully pivot things around, which I found to be really helpful from like a productivity standpoint, but also from just like a mental well-being. I don't feel any pressure to do anything kind of thing.
Yeah, for sure. How to stay productive when pivoting, I think, is really important because it's easy to pivot and like sort of just backtrack unnecessarily. I think there's a huge difference between like having a feeling about something being right or wrong and having feelings about something being right or wrong that are then validated by data. You're feeling based, but like you also then look at things, you look at things critically, I think a lot of artists get stuck in like the, well, this doesn't feel right, I'm nervous about it. And then they pivot unnecessarily. Whereas like you can trust your feelings, but like let them be backed by fact.
Yeah, I think that's a very fair point. Any of my hesitation feelings that I have come from data for the most part. But, and you might be different, but I think that just whatever it is, allowing yourself to pivot and explore things is really important. I also am a fan of, like, if you want to pivot, cool. Don't completely pull the rug out from underneath yourself. So, for example, we didn't just go to TikTok ads, right? We left what was working on, and then we started something else up to kind of see how it performed. So,
right. Don't rug yourself.
Right, yeah. Like, don't just chop your own legs out from underneath you. And it's like, okay, well, now we got nothing. And that kind of stinks. It's like you want to leave the working things in place as you pivot. And then you can completely switch over after the fact if it works.
Yeah, that's a good point. Use your data to determine what's working and what's not, and pivoting based on that rather than just like chopping the legs off of everything that you're doing and trying to start fresh with ignoring the roadmap that you've made. I like that all of these mental frameworks have kind of built upon themselves.
Yeah, I mean, I would like to say that we intended that. And actually, you wrote the bullet points down, so maybe you did. But it was...
I didn't.
Oh, there you go. So it was really nice, though, to kind of see how this stuff is like, look, it starts at a high level. It works itself down from there. And maybe it'll change, right? But if you keep those initial bullet points in mind with your mindset, I think that that's what will allow you to feel good about pivoting, because it's like you're pivoting for the reason that, hey, you know where your fans live, or you know what your content schedule is going to look like. And it's not just a free-for-all at that point.
For sure. Yeah, I think that that's a really, really great point. Man, this was a good episode. This was a lot of fun. I hope you guys dig this. I hope you dug getting into some of the mental processes and the mindsets that we've seen some really, really awesome artists employ to keep them going, to keep them creative, to keep them moving towards their goals. I think that that was really the main purpose of this episode, and sort of unpacking these things. I had a really good time with it.
Yeah, same. It's a high level thing that we don't talk about too much on the podcast, but it was really kind of fun and nice to just go through it. And it's like, hey, here's how to succeed mentally when it comes to marketing.
Yeah, totally. Well, I'm looking forward to seeing a whole bunch of indies crush it throughout 2022. Welcome to the new year. We are so excited. We've got a bunch of awesome stuff planned for Creative Juice. So we'll be catching you guys next time. If you're looking for any marketing help in 2022 and you're looking to build upon your team, we are opening up a few slots at the IndieX agency. So if you are looking to build your team, we'd love to hear from you. We'd love to hear what you're doing in your music career and what you're looking to do in the new year. So we'll leave a link to the IndieX app in the show notes where you can apply, and we'll take a look at what you're up to and see if it might be a good fit to work together. But until next time, we will catch you next week on Creative Juice. See you, Indies. Peace out.